All right, so today we are going to be talking with Gary Pittman, the man himself, the guy that made fluoride poison on tap what it is. I mean, he was the insider at Occidental Chemical that really just blew the lid off of the phosphate industry and hydrofluorosilicic acid. You know what? I haven't said that name in so long. I kind of forget how to even say it. Hydrofluorosilicic acid. Did I say that right, Mr. Pittman?
Yes, that's fine.
That's all right. Great. Well, today we are talking with Mr. Gary Pittman. Mr. Pittman, how are you feeling today? Thank you for joining us.
I feel okay, Paul.
Good. Good. And so for those of you who don't know who he is, I really encourage you to check out this film, Fluoride Poison on Tap. We made this film over the course of about 3 years, I think. And it's really groundbreaking. It has a lot of information that a lot of people have no idea about. So I know there's a lot of listeners out there that haven't seen it. And so I really do encourage you to go to framingtheworld.com, get a copy of Fluoride Poison on Tap, and check it out today. I want to also tell you about 2 books that we have on the store that Mr. Pittman wrote. And this is the book, Phosphate, Fluorides, Toxic Torts. And this is just a great book. This is a book by Mr. Pittman himself about the chemical exposure that he suffered at the hands of Occidental Chemical. And, of course, Relentless, which is his new book. I really hope you guys check this out at framingtheworld.com. But, you know, Mr. Pittman suffered a lot of health problems and because of him working at this chemical plant. And so I just wanted to talk to him. You know, life is fragile. Life is short. We don't know how much time we have left with certain people. And I know Mr. Pittman is, you know, this might be, you never know if it's going to be the last time we talk to him. So, you know, I just really want to pick his brain and get him on the show and just kind of talk about some different issues that that I haven't discussed in a while. But so, Mr. Pittman, how are you? Since, you know, I talked to you years ago now. How has your health been over the course of the last few years?
Well, it's slowly deteriorating. You know, in '16 when I had the stroke, I had a stroke in 2016 April, and ever since then things has been going downhill. I got to go the October the 6th up to the cancer center. They have to draw about a pint of blood out of me because my blood gets too thick, and they have to draw a pint out usually to thin it up. I suffer from COPD with emphysema, severe emphysema. I got heart arrhythmia problems. The AFib is what caused the stroke in 2016. While I was sleeping, my heart went into AFib. I'm now on blood thinners. I take Eliquis twice a day. And it's just that it seems like everything's going downhill now. And of course, I credit the chemical plants with part of that. We were exposed to a lot of fluoride fumes, sulfur dioxide fumes, all types of chemicals, petroleum distillates, defoamers. You know, too many really to list. I think I listed them all in the book. It took about a half a page. My health is slowly going downhill, but I am getting older. I'll be 67 years old in November. So I guess the exposure out there has really affected about every organ in my body. plus my blood, the bones. I think the reason for the blood problem is with my bones. The cancer doctor told me that the bones is what makes the blood. Well, my bones are stuck, or they don't know what to do. They just make too much blood, too much hemoglobin, and so they have to take it out. So as far as my health goes, I don't know. It's just going downhill. I hope I can stick around a few more years, but who knows?
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, Mr. Pittman, he was what was your title? Supervisor at the chemical plant, and so he oversaw a lot of the production there, and a lot of the guys that you worked with on a daily basis, a lot of those people have passed away, and are you one of the last ones left from that plant?
One of the last ones that was in the lawsuit that became sick. I'm one of the last ones left. A lot of my friends have passed on, and some of them that I think there's one more that hasn't passed on, but he's very, very sick. I think he's unable to walk now, and I just don't know all what's wrong with him. Probably a lot of the same things that's wrong with me, but some of them has, most of them has passed on.
Yeah. And, a lot of people don't understand, but Big Phosphate is a huge business in Florida, and they are just digging up the whole landscape of Florida here. And so can you talk about what is phosphate for those who don't know, and why it's so devastating to the state of Florida?
Well, phosphate mining has been going on in Central Florida since the late 1890s. They used to do it with shovels a long time ago, but really there's only one company down there left, and that is Mosaic. They have bought out IMC, Agrico, Gardenet, all those old plants that were down there. Mosaic now has has most of the mines. They're very powerful in the phosphate lobby in Florida, and they're always in the news about a new spill or wells being contaminated. I just got a call from a guy the other day down there. Somebody had built some apartments close to a gypsum stack, which I couldn't believe it in 2020. Somebody building a apartment complex close to a radioactive gypsum stack. And I think they're going to sue because a lot of people are getting ill there. They don't know where it's coming out of the water or the radioactivity. They don't know yet. They're in the early stages of this suit. There's some companies in North Florida that still dig phosphate. Now, of course, phosphate is used to make phosphate fertilizer. A lot of it's turned into superacid. That's what I did out there. It's a black, thick acid. And, of course, it's broke down when it leaves there in plants to where it's thinned out and used for liquid fertilizer. The P2O5 is what plants need. That is plant food is what it is, P2O5. The problem is it's full of fluoride. It's full of radioactivity. Most people don't know this, that if you put it on the pastures, the cows will eat the grass that's been fertilized by the phosphate, which has the fluoride, the radioactivity. If they're putting it under crops, such as bell peppers, peas, beans, it uptakes into the food. That's the reason I think the cancer rate is so high. Hamilton County at one time was the cancer center of Florida, where I live. And it's basically, used for fertilizer. Phosphate is. It was buried a long time ago, along with uranium. During the time when Florida was underwater, Another name we like to call it is bone phosphate lime, BPL, and that's really, where the goodie is, the P2O5, the plant food.
Now, when you worked for that chemical plant, it was called Oxy or Occidental Chemical, correct? And then has that name changed over the years? And what is it called now?
Yes, Occidental, that was when I filed a lawsuit with them. In a few years, they sold out to a group, PCS, or Potash of Saskatchewan, Canada was who it was. And they have since left, and they have sold out to a group named Nutrien. And that is who is operating the plants now.
Oh, wow. So that's changed then, because when we made the film, it was that other company. So now it's changed.
It's changed again.
And so now people need to understand, like, why does the name keep changing so much? And please explain, because the lawsuits are a big deal, and they're just destroying the landscape. And so, can you explain why they keep changing their names?
Well, I don't think they've changed their names. I don't think it's the same company this time. When we done the film, it was Potash Saskatchewan of Canada had it. PCS they call themselves. And I think PCS just, they were kind of involved in the lawsuit. When I sued Occidental Chemical, PCS had just bought it from Occidental, but some of the people that joined in that lawsuit were working for PCS at that time. So they were kind of involved in the back burner of that Occidental Chemical suit. Well, evidently they left and sold out to this company called Nutrien, and that is who runs the show out there now. But since then, what has happened is all of what we used to call Swanee River Chemical, that was the biggest chemical plant, they have disassembled that whole plant, all but the DAP granulation plant. In other words, it's just don't look anything like it did at one time. So they're only running Swift Creek Chemical Plant in Swift Creek Mine. And that's the one that we filmed when you went out, and we filmed from the air. The Gypsum Stacks and all that plant, they are still running. But when I worked out there was probably 1,500, 1,600 people working out there at that time. And now probably only 200, 250.
Yeah. And so, if you don't know what we're talking about, it's because you probably haven't seen the film, but we did drone shots of these gypsum stacks, and these gypsum stacks are these huge mounds of earth, and with dug out, and it contains all this toxic waste inside of these stacks of earth, and it leaches out into the ground. Sometimes hurricanes come through and washes them out, and it goes into the groundwater, or it can leach out into the earth, and so these gypsum stacks have really just devastated the landscape of Florida. Can you talk about how that is?
Well, the gypsum stacks, the way they start is they actually build on top of the ground. When you make phosphoric acid, you add phosphate rock, sulfuric acid, and water. The sulfuric acid is added to digest the phosphate rock. Well, as you digest the phosphate rock, you have to filter out the gypsum. And so it goes on a table filter. You filter out the liquid, which is phosphoric acid. Of course, it still contains some sulfuric acid and other impurities. And you save the phosphoric acid, of course, in the tanks. And the gyp cake, they call it, which is the remnants of the phosphate rock and the sulfuric acid and water, is reslurried and sent to the gypsum stacks. Well, as it goes out there, of course, it goes into the little pond that they've made. Well, then excavators, they dig the phosphate, the gypsum out, the radioactive gypsum out, and they start stacking it around the side to make a dam. Well, they just keep doing that, and it gets bigger and bigger and taller until some of them are, hundreds of feet high, and they are acres big. And of course, that phosphogypsum contains uranium 226, radon 222, uranium 236, 238, and all sort of impurities in there from making the phosphoric acid. You have a lot of fluoride, you have sulfuric acid, you have all your elements, iron, aluminum, magnesium, a lot of minor elements. It's all toxic. And these gypsum stacks are built on top of the ground. And in Florida, what you have is you have topsoil, you have subsoil, you have some clays. You keep on going down till you get to limestone. Florida's like a sponge. It's like a sponge looks. You got limestone under there. Well, as this acidic water and toxins gradually seep down, they dissolve the limestone, and a lot of times it'll form a hole, it'll cave in and get into the drinking water, because that goes into the Florida aquifer. And that's where I think a lot of people are being poisoned, is because the drinking water is being contaminated. I know in Mosaic down in Central Florida, in our plant right up here in Hamilton County, I think I got pictures in my book. We even got maybe some pictures in the film, I think. But it's just a toxic soup is what I call it.
Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting topic when you look into it. It's a topic that, I was I was not aware of until I started making the film, and it was Dr. Kennedy that started explaining what these were, and then he's the one that kind of pointed me to you, and that's kind of how Fluoride Poison on Tap came about. And so I really encourage you guys to check out that film. It's free on YouTube. You can check it out there, or you can purchase the DVD at framingtheworld.com. But I wanted to play a clip from the film just to kind of show people kind of a little history behind the chemical plant that you worked at. So I'm going to play this clip real quick, Mr. Pittman, and
All
then
right.
I'm going to have you talk about it.
When Gary Pittman filed a lawsuit against Occidental Chemical Company, he knew what he was getting into. Occidental was a mammoth organization and no stranger to litigation. It was Occidental that had been responsible for one of the most horrendous environmental tragedies in American history, the Love Canal.
President Carter declared a state of emergency today in the Love Canal area of New York's Niagara Falls, where toxic chemicals were discovered oozing from the ground.
My 3 kids were born with birth defects. My wife's had cancer.
This was a site that literally is best described, orange goop, toxic soup is what it has been referred to. You had 80 different chemicals. I mean, some very bad stuff was in these people's backyards, was literally seeping into their basements.
Health officials are urging more families to move, but that's not as simple as it seems.
Between the years of 1947 and 1953, the Hooker Chemical Corporation, which is a subsidiary of Occidental Chemical, used the Love Canal section of Niagara Falls as a dumping site for toxic waste.
Today we write the final chapter of the environmental disaster called Love Canal. In doing so, we make clear that when people make a mess of our environment, they should and they will be held responsible for cleaning up their mess.
The EPA concluded that Occidental dumped millions of tons of hazardous chemicals and then sold the property to the Niagara Falls School District for $1.
In papers to be filed in court in Buffalo this afternoon, the Occidental Chemical Corporation will agree to pay $129 million.
In the end, Occidental was out of pocket a total of $200 million for damages and settlements, not including court costs and the millions they spent defending themselves.
These kind of dangers no longer will be tolerated by the American public. The day of discarding hazardous materials indiscriminately and haphazardly is over.
There must never be in our country another Love Canal. Thank you very much.
But in reality, this $200 million spanking to a multi-billion-dollar-a-year company is far less severe than a parking ticket to the average person. Occidental had a pattern of disregard for environmental issues. In the summer of 1979, the New York Times reported that Hooker's plant in White Springs, Florida, was convicted of polluting the air with fluoride. Even more damning were the copies of corporate memorandums passed among Hooker executives in which it was revealed that Hooker's top echelon knew and approved of the pollution violations. Finally, Hooker Company officials admitted to accidentally poisoning local water supplies not only at the New York location, but at their Michigan and California plants. The White Springs plant that Gary Pittman worked for not only was polluting the air with fluoride, but had also dumped tons of waste on their own property. In a leaked inter-office memo obtained by an insider at Occidental's White Springs plant reveals 25 different waste disposal sites buried on the property. This highly classified document lists the hazardous, carcinogenic, highly fluoridated toxins that are all buried on the site and are still there today. Gary Pittman knew that he was about to embark into a David versus Goliath scenario. Occidental was not to be trusted. They had been known to buy and intimidate officials. They provided financial support to the campaigns of certain political candidates and owned judges. Gary had only 12 lawyers against Occidental's prestigious law firm, Holland & Knight, which at the time consisted of 540 of the nation's top lawyers. However, to his benefit, Gary had the documents to prove his case. He also had a stellar record within the company and was known as a company man. He was a loyal and hardworking employee. The last thing he had ever imagined doing was to sue the very company that had provided him such a good life. In spite of this, Gary felt as though he had no choice. He was sick and couldn't work. So Gary named a price that could make him go away, and Occidental accepted. In the end, Gary settled out of court with Occidental, but his health problems still linger. The phosphate industry is one of the biggest industries in Florida. It brings in billions of dollars each year in profits. Television ads and billboards often portray strip mining as a wholesome industry that creates jobs and feeds the world. However, a closer look reveals the extreme toxicity to our environment and health.
Paul, I think what you need to do is get some aerial shots of that plant. Because you cannot see the devastation going on from just riding down the road. If you could get some aerial shots of that plant, I could point out what's going on, what's happening, you know, and point out where a lot of the pollution's going on and stuff like that.
What people don't realize is this is where hydrofluorosilicic acid starts, because you have to mine the rock, you have to make the phosphoric acid, and hydrofluorosilicic acid is made from the fumes off the phosphoric acid. Then it's put into the city's drinking water. I worked out there my whole life, basically, and I never seen that good of shots.
You don't see this on Google Earth. I mean, you just see an overview, and you get the idea that those are there, but...
Yeah, what you see here is, you know, the common person never sees this. They don't really want you to see it either, because then you would know how much devastation, you know, there is at these plants. And you know what's so good about it is the general public's going to get to see this in this new film, and they can, you know, they can decide, you know. And like I said, that's where your hydrofluorosilicic acid starts. That's the way they mine. It's overburdened. They take the overburden off to get to the ore.
Basically, they take a nice forest area, they cut down all the trees, they burn all the stumps, and they take all the topsoil off.
The overburden is topsoil, subsoil, clays, until they get to the ore.
This right here is just They've already dug it all out.
Yeah, they've mined this, and as you can see the forest in the background, and you can see the huge chunk of land that they have mined. The phosphate lobby is very, very powerful. You know, it's a sad situation. It's devastating to the earth. This water, this coffee-colored water, it's just hard to describe how bad it is. You know, when you call it water, it's not really water. It's so laden with so many different chemicals, and it contains many elements such as cadmium, chromium, mercury, nickel, beryllium, arsenic, fluorides, lots of fluorides.
Lead, and I heard it even has it has radioactive elements in it too.
It is radioactive. Uranium-238, radium-226. It also has traces of polonium-210. Very contaminated stuff. A lot of people don't realize that this is some of the worst contamination at a phosphoric acid chemical plant. Where this was all located was wetlands. If you have a wetland, you'll have a heck of a time trying to get a permit to go into a wetland, you know, to do anything. You know, if you want to dig a pond or whatever, they're not going to give you a permit. But somehow these people got permits to dig up all this wetland, and they claim they'll reclaim it, but it'll never be reclaimed like it once was. It's just, there's no way. They will reclaim just enough land, and they'll have a little show place so visitors, and they can go show them what they've been doing. Yeah, we've mined this out, and now this is what we've done. Mm-hmm. And you know, for what they've destroyed out there, you know, a 10 or 15 or 20 acre plot they've reclaimed. Nah, they're not going to reclaim it. What they'll eventually do, and this is just my prediction, is they'll change the name of this place and they'll form a corporation, and they'll call it something like White Springs Phosphate. And then when they finish mining out the rock, they'll bankrupt. Up here on the right, we're going to have the administration offices. They used to be in the chemical plant, and they moved them. They used to eat the pantyhose off the women's legs. Wow. It says, "To whom it may concern, I worked at the above-named company, Occidental Chemical Company, White Springs, Florida, in 1968 and part of 1969. Our accounting department was located in the admin building, which at that time was located at the chemical plant. Many mornings when we employees would get out of our vehicles, women, our pantyhose would dissolve off of our legs. It was explained to us that it was a chemical fallout, not to worry. Our boss would see that each of us girls would get $1 to get us another pair of pantyhose. The chemicals also would eat small pit holes in the paint on our vehicles. Years later, they moved the admin building away from the chemical plant to out by the main road. And there's several more names here of other girls that could testify to this. So there's three things you can see from the space station, and that's the Great Pyramids of Egypt, the Gypsum Stacks of Florida, and the Great Wall of China. Man. And that's how large they are. They have them in South Florida and Central Florida that are 400 acres big. It's a huge operation. They dig cubic tons of rock a day.
What is with the water up there?
The pond water is water they use for the process, and it's recycled. The water's used over and over, and it gets stronger and stronger and more contaminated.
How do they contain it? Just by building a dam like that?
A dam around it, and that's what I was fixing to tell you. There's no liner under that stack. It's right on top of the ground, and it is leaching.
Sure it is.
Through the groundwater.
Yeah, I read somewhere about a sinkhole that took place.
The reason the sinkhole developed is because the acidic water eating away the limestone. And
once the limestone gives way, you're in the groundwater.
Wow.
Because in Florida, when you drill a well, you have to go through the limestone to get to the actual. Sure. When that 84 million gallons fell through in there, it contaminated all this water around.
It had to have.
Like I said, you know, it's just a matter of time before, you know, you have a sinkhole like that. It's just a weak point. Wherever there's a weak point in a cavity in the limestone is where the bottom falls.
Eventually going to happen.
Yeah, in all of them.
In all of them.
It's just a massive, massive operation.
Yes, it is, and if you'll see, there's sections in this phospho-gypsum stack. When the sinkhole caved in one of these, it was one of these sections. It wasn't all of it. Only that one section was 87 million gallons. Whoa. So you could multiply that times 4. You know, that's just a lot of toxic waste to be going into the aquifer.
In addition to this recycled toxic water up there in those
ponds,
you call them, in addition to that, they're taking fresh water too, right?
Of course, they use a lot of fresh water because, see, this is the main thing that they don't want you to know, is what they call the water balance. It just makes them nervous if you start talking about the water balance. What do they add back when they need water if it's leaching?
Right.
It's going away. So they have to add some fresh water.
I see.
To keep the process going.
Right.
The phosphate industry uses more fresh water than any other industry in the state of Florida. You know, and sometimes they have to release water out of those toxic ponds.
Where do they put it?
They put it in the creeks and it runs into the Swanee River. Now what they do to it is lime it to bring the pH up so it don't kill the fish immediately. The Swanee River, they claim, is a pristine waterway. But if you ask the Fish and Game Water Commission in Florida, they'll tell you not to eat over 1 fish out of that river a month.
Wow.
Because of lead and mercury and chromium and cadmium. They won't tell you that, but that's why.
Yeah, that's why.
This is just a lot of the documentation I've reached through the years. What really caught my eye was, like we had talked about earlier, the 1972 through 1979 misrepresenting environmental data. And they charged them $575,000 for emitting 10 times the amount of fluoride allowed below.
And I was working there when that was going on, and the fumes were just unbelievable. It pit the glass on your windshields, make them so foggy it would etch the glass.
Just having your car parked out there while you're at work. I mean, back in the 60s, you know, I mean, even earlier, they realized that those fumes were
very toxic.
Very toxic.
The phosphate company pretty much polices themselves. They have their own crews do their stack testing and all the other environmental things. And, you know, that's kind of like the fox watching the hen house. And I have been involved where they would go up to test a stack and come down and tell me, so something's wrong. This stack is going to fail. You know, so you look around, find the problem, straighten it out, and say, okay, boys, y'all can go up there and test now. I have also been at the point to where we couldn't find what was wrong, and they were doing the test, and we would just go and open a blind in the fume ducts to allow more fresh air to rush in, so it would dilute the emissions.
But I know for a fact that they cheat on these tests. Once you know that, then you lose all faith in these regulatory agencies because you know it's all a farce.
In this past, I'd say 6 months, there's been 4 people that I know of that I grew up with. They were younger than me. They were 52, all of them died. I do honestly believe it has something to do with the phosphate chemical plants out there.
I would imagine you've seen some injured employees.
I've seen people burned. I've seen people blown up. I saw a man killed, and he was going to weld on a rotary drum filter, and somebody had washed it with a solution of sulfuric acid and pond water. Found out later the guy had struck an arc to weld on that thing, and it exploded. And it killed him, messed up his friend, too, that was helping. Yeah, it's a very hazardous work environment. When you digest phosphate rock with sulfuric acid, that's what you're going to give off, hydrogen fluoride and silicon tetrafluoride. Now, even at that strength,
It'll eat up concrete, asphalt, stainless steel, even the fume ducts after a while, which is made out of fiberglass. Very corrosive, the most corrosive acid known to man. Used to etch glass, it's used for a lot of things. One of the things it's used for is to fluoridate drinking water. Who in the world would want to drink water with this stuff in it? I do know that Occidental Chemical, at that time it was a subsidiary of Occidental Chemical Company. It was Hooker. Now, I know when during the years I worked for Occidental, a lot of times my paychecks had Hooker on them. They'd go Hooker Chemical Company, sometimes Occidental Chemical Company, but Hooker is actually the ones in the Love Canal. What they did is they buried a bunch of toxic drums up there and kind of forgot about it. The school system up there decided they were going to buy or wanted to buy this land to build a school, and they were going to build houses there and whatever. And so Occidental or Hooker, you know, they were Hooker was a subsidiary, but Occidental was the parent company. Anyway, they sold the land to the school system for $1. And so they went on about their business. Well, they decided to start building schools and houses on this land. Well, after a while, people started noticing this stuff oozing out of the ground. Some of them had swimming pools, and it started burning the children, making people sick, leukemia, such as that. Well, state of New York turned around and sued Hooker and Occidental, and wound up getting a big settlement out of them because they had buried these toxins up there years ago, and I don't think they told them about it. But anyway, it was a big deal. It was the biggest settlement in chemical settlement in history at the time. And that's I think we got more about it in the film, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah, and I really love that scene, and for that scene, I did a ton of research, and I actually purchased a lot of archive footage that had never been seen that I've never seen. I had to contact these archive places, and you pay by the second, and then they send you the footage that you can't even view it before you buy it. And I was so happy with what I got, because you kind of take a chance on doing that. But I got back these awesome news clips, and you saw them right there in the film. But yeah, that was a huge deal right there in Niagara Falls. That Hooker company, you know, transitioned into Occidental Chemical, which is the plant you worked at. Now, you didn't work at the one in Niagara Falls. You worked at the one in White Springs there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hamilton County, White Springs, Florida.
Yeah, so can you explain, like, because did you know about that lawsuit and what that happened back when you were working there, or was that something you figured out later while you were doing your when you were doing your research?
No, I was working at Occidental in White Springs when this lawsuit was started.
Oh.
And, you know, we knew about it, and we also kind of knew how the company done business, too. But anyway, no, we knew about it, and, of course, back then, you know, we were all young, and it was either before the time or about the same time that OSHA was being formed, and also the EPA, you know. This was back in the early 70s. And so we didn't know anything about any of the phosphate dangers because there wasn't any internet. The only books on it the phosphate industry had written, so that, you know, they're not going to incriminate themselves. And so they played the part that everything coming out of the stacks at White Springs, you know, you'd see the smoke coming out. They used to say, the favorite saying they used to say was, it's harmless steam and vapors. That's what they said. And many people don't know this, but the state doesn't police those chemical plants in Florida or a lot of the other states. They police themselves. They go up and they stack test, and whatever numbers they give to the state, that's what the state takes. So we knew better. We knew ammonia, DAP would, stop you from breathing. We knew fluoride was bad because, we'll put it this way, we knew the fumes coming off the phosphoric acid was bad. We knew you couldn't breathe. We also knew the sulfur dioxide would paralyze your lungs. We knew that, but we tried to stay away from it. That was a big operation out there at one time. We were actually making, taking phosphate rock. We were making granulated fertilizer. We were making animal food supplement, polyphos. We were making superacid from phosphoric acid. We were sending the superacid to Russia, the Soviet Union at the time. And in return, we would get, it was ammonia is what we would get from. It was a barter agreement that Arm & Hammer had worked out with the Russians. But it was a big outfit out there, and like I said, 1,500 people worked there. We made acid, like I said, all the granulated fertilizer. It was just a big operation, and you have to melt sulfur to make sulfuric acid. You got to have sulfuric acid to make phosphoric acid. But of course, burning the sulfur in the sulfur plants, that gives off SO2. So when you went to work out there, you're exposed daily to the dust, radioactive dust, sulfur dioxide, phosphoric acid fumes, which contains bucoodles of fluoride. So you were in that work environment 8, 12 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week. I think back then we worked 7 days a week and get off 4 days a month, I think. And a lot of times you'd have to go into vessels to clean them out, and we didn't have any safety equipment. We didn't have any, I think they hire all that done now by pressure cleaners. But in the old days, it was all done kind of by hand and by the people they had. It just was a bad environment to work in at that time. I think gradually through the years they've gotten a little better, but I imagine the people still working there is getting some exposures. I think Mosaic does test people down there, but I just don't know. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, because, when you got the job, and we explained this in the movie, it was kind of like, your dream job. You're making good money. You're able to, raise your family right. And so I guess my question would be is, like, when did you start realizing that, oh, maybe this isn't the dream job of the century. Maybe this is hurting my health. When did that kind of become a thought that you had?
Well, to tell you the truth, I think we knew it. I think most people, when they're young, I think they think they're kind of bulletproof to a point because, you don't think you're ever going to die. When you're young, you think differently than you do. The older you get, the more mellow you get. And the more older you get, that sooner or later, it gets more evident you're going to die. But saying that, I think basically it all came out. I was an area supervisor over several plants out there, and the government had started to take a lot of interest in that stuff, and they passed a law, and I think it was where every chemical you had at a chemical plant or anywhere, it didn't matter where it was at, you had to have what they call an MSDS, or a Material Safety Data Sheet. Anybody had the right that was working at a place to go and look and see what they were working with. Phosphoric acid, sulfuric acid, or just say it's some kind of oil you put in a pump. We had to have an MSDS on it, a Material Safety Data Sheet. It was my job at the time to take every chemical that we had in those plants And to make a material safety data sheet or obtain one from the vendor or whoever we had bought the stuff from, or if we were making it, it was our job. I had to put that in a book. And then when somebody come in and says, you know, I'm working with this sulfuric acid today, I'm working with this limestone rock today, I want to see a material safety data sheet on it to see what it may do to my health. That's when I knew, when I was putting that together, because some of the stuff we were working with, a lot of it was cancer causing. A lot of it, you know, we already knew it'd burn you. You know, common sense told us about a lot of it, but the fumes it gave off, we didn't really have a real good handle on what all was in the chemicals we were working with. That's when I knew then, because I was starting at that time to go downhill. That's when I started to suspect, well, God, I'm breathing this stuff. I'm exposed every day. I've been exposed for 20 years. No wonder I'm having these problems. And the more talk to other people, they were having some of the same problems. And those guys that you mentioned earlier that died, a lot of those guys have been out there a long time too and exposed to some of the same chemicals. Yeah. And of course, you can't forget the radioactivity, you know. You going and being exposed to that every day, you know, and that's something else was in the material safety data sheets, the radioactivity and what it could do to you. Cancer was the big C, was a lot of things you'd see here and there, and a lot of people out there has died of cancer, all kinds of cancer, lung, brain, stomach, pancreas, you know, just different cancers, different parts of the body. Bone. I had one mechanic that died of bone cancer that was in the suit. I think I've got his name in the book that died of the bone cancer. But that's when I started to know, is when I started to really know, is when I started to put together those material safety data sheets, and that was probably somewhere around 1990. Around 1990. Might have been 89, might have been 90, 91, but somewhere around 1990.
Yeah, and you won a class action lawsuit against Occidental Chemical, and in that lawsuit, and if you don't want to talk about it, I understand, but in that lawsuit, weren't you not supposed to talk about any of the problems that you're facing publicly? And I guess the question is, why are you talking about them today?
Well, I never did see anything on that. That's what I was told, but I never did see anything or sign anything that I remember. Main thing that I was told is I could not give out the information on how much money I got.
Oh.
What they told me. And to tell you the truth, I don't think I even signed, but I've honored that because, you know, I remember that very, very clear that they said I couldn't tell anybody how much money I received from the lawsuit, but I don't remember signing anything about talking about the industry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and they probably just don't want you to say how much money you made because they didn't want the others in the lawsuit to get that same amount.
Probably. I just don't think, because, you know, they're not going to admit any guilt anyway.
Yeah.
You know, in these type of suits, you know, I think I did sign an agreement that said that I wouldn't talk about the money I got, and I think they put in there they would not admit any guilt.
Yeah.
You know, which is standard in this type of thing.
Yeah.
The only way we could have won, what we did, we had a settlement. We did not win anything. We had a settlement. It was a draw, really. They paid me so much if I'd go away. Okay, if we'd have took them into the courthouse and proved that they had done all this, then that would have been a win. But what you have to say is, you have to look at it several different ways. Did I win? I don't know if I won or not, but I knew they paid me to go away. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, you got to do what's best for your family. You got, yeah. So I'm sure that was a super hard decision because I know others were involved in that lawsuit. So, and I know, you had a lot of friends that were involved in that lawsuit as well. So.
Yeah, I did. The thing about it was we all talked about it, and everybody had to do what they felt was right for them. And the thing about it is the best thing you can do in a situation like that is listen to your attorneys. And my attorney advised me to settle. And so you could fight on if you want to fight these people. They've got millions and millions and millions of dollars to fight you with. They can fight you till hell freezes over.
And they can draw it out for years and years, and as attorney fees rack up and rack up and rack up. And so by the time, even if you did win, you wouldn't have won as much as you won just by settling.
Exactly. I did what the lawyers advised me to do because I knew myself. I mean, I agree with the lawyers. I knew at the time because I've been fighting this thing 7 years. People's got to realize this didn't happen, in a day or two. This thing happened for, a period of over 7 years. We fought this thing. You just got to sit a minute and think about that. You're sitting here pouring your heart and soul, what little bit you got left, because you're weak already and you don't feel like fighting to start with, but you're pouring everything you got into something because you believe it and you know it to be true. Now, proving something and knowing it to be true is something else, especially when you're fighting somebody that's worth billions of dollars. Occidental Chemical is, at that time, I think, was one of the third largest corporations in the world. So you're not screwing around with some mom and pop business down here. They got chemical plants all over the world. So to even go up against somebody like that, you got to be made out of something kind of special. Because I'm gonna tell you something. I was threatened. They told people not to even talk to me. They'll try to. That was the first social distancing I ever experienced, because that's what they told us. Don't talk to that man. Don't talk to him. You'd see somebody in town speak to him, they turn their head and walk away because they didn't want to have nothing to do with you. That's the first social distancing that I ever experienced. But you just have to put yourself in my place or in the other people's places. Heck, you were fighting a battle, and it was every day for 7 years. It was a hell of a something. I think about it sometime and just wonder how in the hell I done what I done and for how long. And your family goes through that. It's just bad.
Yeah, and I remember you telling me about this, when you were settling, that didn't they say, like, write down the number that will make you go away? And you wrote down a number. Is that what happened, or am I thinking of something else?
No, that's exactly what happened. We'd went to several mediations, and every time we go to mediations, they didn't really want to mediate. They'd offer you $3,000 or $4,000, $5,000, just something to say that they had been there, because the judge had ordered that. They had ordered mediation. They had to go, but they didn't have to offer much. So basically, in the end, that's what happened. I didn't expect them to do anything, but so I went to mediation, and I just know a guy come down there, and he was a young guy. I remember he was driving a little sports car, because I was standing out front. We was waiting on him, And I remember him, come up in his little sports car and come in. He was a young fella. And I just remember we went in, and I didn't really care, I was willing to go right on to trial if the lawyers would go with me. And he just come in, and we got to talking. He just asked me, so how much will it take for you to go away? That's exactly what he said. And there was a yellow legal pad sitting on top of the table. And I was sitting there, and my workers' comp lawyer was sitting over there on the other side, and I just took a piece of that paper. No, I believe I just pulled the whole pad over, and I just wrote a number down and throwed it over to him. And I just figured, wasn't nothing happened anyway, like the other 5 or 6 times I'd been to mediation over the years. And he looked at it, and he just told me, so we can do that. I said, well, if we can do that, then let's do it.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. I showed Dorothy the pad. She shook her head, So that was the starting of the end. But, people think, well, you still have to go through a lot of motions before you get to money. And, the money was one thing. I had to take care of my family and all, but the damage was done.
And the money's not going to bring your health back. It's not going to give you more time with your grandchildren and your children.
No, it's not. It's not going to do that, and it's not going to make it to where you can breathe again.
Yeah.
So, if I had it to go with again, I'd have probably looked for another line of work. But and they do. They still pay the most in this county, and Mosaic down there. You look down there, it's good money. Those guys down there, a lot of them are making $80,000-$90,000 a year. Welding, mechanics, electricians. The job I had at the time out there now pays about $130,000 a year. And so back then, I think that was way back in the late 80s, 90s, I think I was making about 50 something, but now it'd be about 130. That's what I found out here the other day. A boy told me that's what his supervisor made. So, that's good money. You take care of your family and have a few things you need, save a little bit, and everything else around here or anywhere around here wasn't half that.
Yeah, and it's not an extremely hard job, physically demanding, right?
No, it's all automated. You go around, you breathe the fumes, and you're exposed to different things. That's why they pay so good. But and it's gotten easier through the years. Things is more automated than it was in the old days when I was out there. And I think since the lawsuit, I think they're on their toes out there, and I think they scrub the fumes better. I think they furnish the PPE. I think everything is a lot, probably 100% better than it was when I worked out there. But I think the lawsuit, and I've had people tell me this, they said there's one damn scrubber they make sure is running, and that's the one at the plant where I work.
Wow.
Because I reckon the state kind of keeps an eye on that certain scrubber. But back in the old days, we'd run days the scrubber wasn't even running. It just, it's hard to believe that went on, but it did. And you got to think back to the early 70s. How long ago has that been? Almost
50 years.
What, 50 years ago?
Yeah, 50 years now.
Yeah.
Wow. So I did want to talk about these gypsum stacks a little bit because, a lot of times these companies go out of business. They dig up all the ground, they go out of business, and they just leave these huge gyp stacks on the landscape of Florida, and then they leak, they cause all this environmental pollution, and no one's held liable for that. Can you talk about that point?
Well, usually what they do, there's one down there, I'm trying to think of the name of it, and it's eluding me right now, but there's one down there in Central Florida right now that a company did bankrupt and leave. And of course it becomes the property of the county it's in. I think this is in I'm wanting to say Polk County. what I want to say. Polk County, I think.
I believe so, and I think we talked about it in the film, the one you're talking about. I'm pretty sure we talked about it.
And anyway, but what happens is, and it may happen here, they once a company leaves, and it's according to how they leave. I mean, just like PCS, Occidental sold to PCS, PCS sold to Nutrien. Okay, well, just say Nutrien runs it. I know that they're running out of rock here. I knew that because they were running out of rock when I left in '93. So what they're mining now is probably a little bit better than railroad ballast. In other words, there ain't nothing to it. Probably the P2O5 is low. The insolubles, the sand is probably high. I don't even really see how they're making phosphoric acid out of it, but they probably are, but it's probably low grade. But what I'm saying is they're going to run out unless they can find more rock in the adjoining counties, in which I don't think they would. I think Occidental would have done that. But what I'm saying, if they leave, usually what they're going to do is they're going to probably bankrupt, or either if they just leave, just say they shut the gates and they leave, those stacks have to be tended to. And if they're not, it's going to rain, they're going to run over. Or like you said, a hurricane comes through and they breach a dam somewhere, it's going to run into a creek, it's going to run into the rivers, going to continue to leach into the groundwater. I don't know. We just have to wait and see what they do here. I know, like I said, in Central Florida, Mosaic, they're a big bunch. I mean, there's a pile of stacks down there. I mean, we got some nice ones here too. Probably 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we got 5 nice big ones. But down there, it's just.
And where's down there, Mr. Pittman?
Central Florida, down there, and
that's
Polk
where.
County.
Yeah, that's where the big mines are, right? All in Central Florida.
That's what they call Bone Valley, and that's where it all started years ago. This up here, where I worked for that mine started in 64, 65, and our mine. But we had 2 at one time, Swanee River Mine and Swift Creek Mine. But like I said, they've been going down there since the 1800s, but really going strong since the 20s is when they started getting in all the, what I would call the processes that we still use today were started back in those days. Even though they're more automated now, and even though the equipment's better, the processes are about the same. You still add sulfuric acid, phosphate, rock, and water. And, that ain't never going to change.
Yeah. Wow. And do you know of any other insiders that are out there that have talked about this? Is there any others?
I'm going to tell you, Paul, those guys down there in Central Florida, all that's been down there a long time. And there is very few people that I know of. There's one old man down there, and if he's still living, he may be dead. Now, when I say old man, I reckon I pot calling the kettle black. But there's a man down there. I'm going to say it that way because, I reckon we all think we're, still young, but there's a man down there probably about my age or maybe a little older, and he was talking a little bit to a guy because a guy called me. I get phone calls from down there a good bit, and and he was telling me about this guy he had learned a lot from, but I don't know if he talks to just people one-on-one. Now, I know there's a lot of that goes on, but as far as talking to somebody like, say, you, or somebody, that's going to make a movie, or somebody that's going to, and I don't think nobody's written a book down there. I think, as far as I know, I'm the first one or only one that's written a book about the industry. I just don't think there is. Or I'd know, or I would know.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny, but I guess people don't like to talk much. I don't know.
Well, is it kind of like a good old boys club? Like it seems like it's more like they keep it in the family and stuff.
It is to a point. You know, you work out there, you're making good money. Most of I'd say the majority of the people working out there buy their bullshit. They think those fumes are steam and harmless vapors. They know better. But at the same time, they're working out there, and they want to be cooperative with the company. You know, they want to keep those jobs. So if the company tells them the water's all right to drink, and I'll tell you, when I was in the plant up there, and this is before I left, the water was so bad in the plant where I was that you couldn't hardly drink it. And I told the guys, and it kept eating up the water fountains, the piping in the water fountains. So I told the guys, I said, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get a reverse osmosis unit up here and put on that thing. So I did. And I remember they were griping one day, and a manager come down from the office, and he come down there and wanted to know if them boys had any complaints. A lot of times they'd come down like that, you know, just for a show. And one old boy told him, said, yeah, I wish we had some decent water to drink. He said, ain't nothing wrong with that water. He went over there and took him a sip out the fountain. You know, he drinks, what, a sip out of there every 10 years. Anyway, and so the boy said, well, it's been eating up the water fountains. He said, well, it said, talking about me, put a reverse osmosis on there. And the guy said, well, can you honestly tell me that this water is safe to drink? And I'm going to tell you, you have to watch people and the words they use. It don't matter if it's politics or if it's something like that. You know, this is what he said. I'll never forget it. He said, this water is biologically safe. Biologically safe. And I was thinking, I almost laughed. You know, I heard him say it, I almost laughed. And I said, you know, I'm thinking to myself, you know, you don't know how much fluoride's in it. You don't know how many he don't know. They haven't analyzed it. But, you know, so, that, you know, if he said, yeah, it was safe to drink, old boys up there, a lot of them, you know, and I'm not saying people out there are stupid, but there's some people out there now don't believe Lord's greasy. And I'm just saying, you know, that anybody that's worked out there that's got any kind of sense knows that environment is not good. They know that environment, you know, all you got to do is breathe a little bit and do a little reading. And nowadays, there's no excuse. I mean, you got internet, you got books, you got anything you want to have on it. But back in those days, you didn't have anything. You had to go by hearsay or just use your brain.
Yeah.
So.
Well, White Springs, Florida, you know, where this company is located, that's a tiny town. And do you know the population of White Springs?
Probably about 700-800.
Yeah. So it's just is it even a town?
Yeah, it's a little small town. It's incorporated. It's 700-800 people. There's 3 towns in Hamilton County. Hamilton County ain't got but 12,000 people in it where I live. And so you got about 700-800 in White Springs. That's on the south end of the county. And Jennings, where you went to when we made part of the film up there, that's about 700-900 people on the north end, and then you got the county seat in the middle, which is Jasper, and it's probably about it might be 3,000-4,000. Now that would be stretching it.
Yeah.
So you 5,000 living in the cities, but like I said, on the north and south end, you got 800-900. South end, which for phosphate, that's where your phosphate is down there, about 900. 800-900.
Well, I noticed that you put your house on the market. Did that ever sell? It doesn't look like. I think you're still living there, right?
Yeah, I decided to stay here. I don't know. You know, I'm too old to move around now.
Yeah, moving's not fun.
No, moving's not fun at all, and yeah, you know, all the kids and all, they love it here. They love the swimming pool and all that stuff, the grandkids and all. And I told Gloria, I don't know where we'd go.
Yeah.
You know, when I was younger, I always wanted to retire and move to the islands down there. And down there around Virgin Islands, down in that area. But, you know, changed my mind on that. I kind of want to stay where there's a few doctors and some hospitals. Of course, they have all that down there, but, you know, it'd all be new.
Yeah. And family's important. You want to be next to your grandkids. You don't know how long you have.
Exactly.
How many grandkids do you have now?
Let's see. I have 3, 4, 5. I have 6 right now.
Wow.
6 grandkids. Yeah, I have 6.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, make sure you tell your wife I said hi. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I want to have you back on in a couple weeks to talk more about just this kind of stuff and maybe play a little bit more clips on the movie. I want to promote the movie a little bit more. You know, I really just...
It's a good movie. It's a good movie. There's some unbelievable footage in that movie. I watched it again the other night. I was in there. And I watched it, me and my wife did. And those drone shots were beautiful.
Yeah, I really love how that film came out. Obviously, I would probably change a few things looking back on it. I recently, to prepare for this interview, I watched about a 20-minute clip of the movie, and I was seeing a few things. I was like, I would change that. But you know what? It is a very good film, and it took a lot of research. A lot of the material that you see in that film is found nowhere. I dug through the archives for months on end with your help, locating different things. So I really take a lot of pride in that film just because of the amount of time and effort and just how groundbreaking it was. And so I really appreciate your part in it. I appreciate your family, your hospitality and everything you've done for our family. You're just a real great guy, and I'm so glad you're still with us here. And what's some closing thoughts, Mr. Pittman? What do you kind of want to leave people with before we take off here today?
Well, it's like I said in my book. I'm not a writer. I wrote that book, and I'm not a writer. But what I wanted people to realize, all these young people especially that's going out here getting jobs, especially if they're going into a place that you think maybe harmful chemicals may be. It don't have to be a chemical plant. It could be anywhere. Just remember that usually if you can smell the stuff, you're being exposed. And if you touch it, of course, you're being exposed. You just want to be careful because a lot of this stuff is going to cause permanent injury to your organs, to your lungs, heart, kidneys, liver. And, the money is not worth it in the long run. This life is short to start with. And, you can find something else to do, or at least, if you want to do that, have on your protective equipment, something that's going to protect you from it. Just get educated on what you're dealing with. That's the main thing that I wrote the book for. And I've been fighting this stuff, I reckon, since 1993. What's that, 27 years of trying to fight this fluoridation thing, the fluoride. And hopefully we've done a little bit of good, Paul.
Awesome. Well, again, Mr. Pittman, thank you so much for coming on the program. I really appreciate your time and your willingness to just talk about these things freely. Again, guys, I really hope you guys check out these 2 books, Toxic Torts by Gary Pittman and his new book, Relentless. You know what? I'm going to get you back on the show soon, Mr. Pittman, because I do want to talk about a little bit of behind the scenes on these books, kind of what made you write them, and a little bit deeper on these books. So we'll do that sometime in the future, if you don't mind. I I appreciate it. Yeah, guys, that was our show today. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's program. Make sure you go out there and support us at framingtheworld.com. Get these books. Get this movie, Fluoride, Poison on Tap. It's a great film. You can share it with your friends and family. And don't forget, guys, to subscribe to our other sites here on Brighteon and on BitChute, because censorship is really serious right now. In fact, my account has been locked for 7 days for a video I just uploaded, and it had nothing to do with anything bad. And it's just, censorship is out of control right now. So please consider going on to those other channels and subscribing. I appreciate everyone tuning in to this live stream. I hope you have a good day, and God bless.